Hello and welcome to this impulse session on systems thinking, in which I will take you through, very briefly, take you through what systems thinking means and how you can implement it to the problems that you solve. Um, my name is Nikhil, and I have a background in sustainable development, and I have been a fellow of the Melton Foundations since 2000. Systems thinking can be basically thought of as a holistic approach that focuses on not just a system in its entirety, but also in the smaller parts into which the system can be divided into. And furthermore, it also tries to look at a system over time and sees how these constituent parts of the system change over time. There's a lot of interesting material available online, and I would highly recommend you to check it out. Especially this link over here, which is from Learning for Sustainability, and it talks specifically about how systems thinking can be applied to sustainability problems. Um, you can also think about interconnections around you. And because we live in a globalized world, it's very hard to imagine things that are simple. For example, even the coffee that you probably had this morning was produced by a farmer in a country that you have no idea about. And we are surrounded by interconnections, and they, of course, manifest in any problem space that we try to intervene in. So it could be very, very interesting to just amongst your group think about interconnections that you see around you. And it's also important to think about what factors play out when you try to solve interconnected problems. So if you apply these interconnections from the previous slide to the problem or problems that you are specifically trying to solve, and think about what factors play out when you try to solve these problems, I'm pretty sure you can come up with factors that you need to think about as problem solvers while approaching sustainability problems through systems thinking. While there might be many factors, I would like to talk specifically about three: control, role, and movement. Control, of course, is an illusion when it comes to complex sustainability problems. And the reason being, you often don't have the power to control the outcome of the problem that you're trying to solve. Similarly, the roles and the hats that you put on while solving sustainability problems are often very undefined. They are dynamic, they change over time, that's one thing, but they are also unclear. And it could be very important to know this before jumping in to the water and trying to solve problems, because your roles will keep changing and you have to sort of mentally prepare yourself for that. And similarly, it's very important to accept that the problem space in which you're trying to intervene is going to move and change over time. And there's no way you can challenge this, there's no way you can change this, but what you can do is accept it and stop relying on stability to solve problems and adopt a more dynamic problem solving technique. Before we take an example of how these control, roles, and movement manifest themselves while problem solving, it's also important to think about the three types of problems. We have some problems that are rather simple, there's linear instructions, and there's a very predictable outcome. So, for example, baking a cake or studying for a test are simple problems. Let's take baking a cake. You have a recipe from your favorite cookbook, you follow the instructions, you follow the method, you get the right ingredients, and you probably will have a pretty good cake. Similarly, a complicated problem. Imagine a problem that has many systems involved, but often asking experts helps. So imagine solving a problem that's related to your project. Say you are having a project around uh, waste management in your locality. And you want to reach out to people through Facebook. And even though you're not an expert in Facebook marketing, you reach out to an agency that helps you reach your desired goal. You have specified the outcome, and these experts help you solve this problem. Whereas complex systems, the the complex problems that you try to solve are the ones that have many systems involved in a dynamic environment. Continuous sensing of the problem and adaptation is required. So, for example, a complex problem is reducing emissions through aviation. It's very important for us to be able to fly from one country to another, especially over long distances, because it's economically important for us, it's socially important for us, but it comes at a huge environmental cost. How do we solve this complex problem, which involves so many, many, many systems? Let's take a simple example that you can use to um, guide your systemic thinking. So, you first start by reacting to the problem, then you anticipate, you design, and then you transform. So, what this means is that imagine you just got a cold and you could just react to it by staying in bed and drinking a lot of fluids, and in 3 days you're going to be fine. But there's a chance that maybe you will catch it again. And so, what you start doing is you start thinking, okay, is there a possibility for me to anticipate to see when I catch colds? When do I feel sick? When do I have low energy? Have there been trends over time? For example, have I been catching more colds when I sleep less? And if that assumption were true, through your pattern analysis, then you can ask yourself the question, what influences these patterns? And how are the patterns related to each other? So, for example, you are catching a lot of cold when you are sleeping less, or you have less energy when you're sleeping less. But when are you sleeping less? Are you sleeping less when you're not eating well? When you are not having a clear cutout time for your work and for yourself? Or maybe you just have too much stress with your professional or personal life. Are these different parts of your life interacting with each other, leading you to sleep less, and thereby making you sick? That's the design part. That's when you start to draw relationships between different parts and patterns. And then finally, the base, you try to transform. Knowing patterns, knowing underlying structures, you can finally form a mental model. What assumptions and values do people hold about the system? What beliefs keep the system in place? So you could be stressed out all the time at work because you believe that career is the most important piece of your identity. And maybe you feel that rest is for the unmotivated, and this leads you working all the time. Thereby, you don't eat well. You thereby eat unhealthy food. You thereby are also working just before you go to sleep, and all of these is leading you to sleep less, which over a period of time leads to the tip of the iceberg, which is you catching a cold. So, react, think about what just happened, anticipate, think about what trends have been there over time, design, think about what has influenced patterns and how are different parts or different patterns related to each other, and finally think about what assumptions, beliefs, and values do you and other problem solvers have about the system. And finally, always think about the problems that you're solving in sustainability from the three pillars of sustainable development perspective. Sustainability values inherently are future oriented and inherently cross disciplinary. But it's important to understand that sustainability, by its definition, means that there are three pillars. There's economic development. A sustainable future society is one where every human being has economic dignity, which means they have economic independence. They are free to uh, make economic choices that impact their well being in a positive way. But at the same time, a sustainable future society is one where environmental protection is important, um, which means that nature and all of its values are protected and preserved and kept pristine to the greatest extent possible. And at the same time, there's social equity, which means that people are not discriminated based on their geographical location, their race, their color, their gender, and they also have access to environmental protection as well as economic development. So, whenever you're trying to solve a problem, whether it's waste management or it's climate change or it's improving the traffic situation in your city or starting a new economic cooperative of local artisans, all problems, even though they might fall directly into one pillar of sustainability, they are always related to the other pillars. I hope you enjoyed this session, and please feel free to reach out to the Melton Foundation in case you have any questions. Attention.